So Jessica Palicki is a nurse practitioner, entrepreneur, and founder of the Mother Well Rooted Collective, a multi-location integrative healthcare ecosystem serving families, women, and adults through functional and root cause medicine. And I was so excited to welcome her as a keynote and also a panelist today because I have so many friends and in the area who, when they talk to me about who they want to take their kids to or who they want to go to for their own needs, it's her service and her company. And I'm just so excited that more people can hear about what she's doing because I think it is what a medical practice should be. So I'd love to welcome Jessica Palicki to the stage.
All right, thank you guys all so much for coming. I know that everybody's a little nervous and kind of this is the first thing here, so we'll start back over. So I own Well Rooted, and so Well Rooted Pediatrics is located in Crystal Lake and Oak Brook, and then we're telehealth in 15 states. So 8 years ago, I founded Well Rooted on purely just hope and dream. So I had no idea where this was going to go, what community we were going to serve, how many people we were going to reach, but I knew that conventional medicine wasn't going to be the answer for me. So I was failed for many years by the conventional system through unproductive surgeries, for infertility, tons of different procedures. And I think what it comes down to is knowing that you have to advocate for yourself, but then if you're not sure what that looks like and you don't have a team behind you, then how are you supposed to do that? So for me, as I continue to move through the well-rooted journey, we've developed this team that allows every mom to feel heard and every person to feel heard. And then we've added 2 of the services. So we have the adult services and we have women's health because everybody is entitled to be able to have that type of step along the way. So for today, I chose to talk about living in a toxic world because I feel like this is something that no matter what, we are always going to be experienced with. And again, going through my journey of miscarriages and knowing that, like, okay, the medical system failed me and I had 3 too many because somebody didn't find something so simple on blood work. At that point, I said, I can't let this happen to my own children. So I was going to be the one that was going to advocate for them the most. And moms in this room, you guys can say that no matter what, you are going to be that first person that advocates for them. And you should always be heard. So living in a toxic world, it was always, how do I support them to the best of the ability? And I think what's so hard, social media can be great, but it also can be very bad. And it can be terrifying to read all the things that you're experienced with or you're exposed to. And it's like, how do we stay healthy? How do we make sure that our kids of this generation are able to stay healthy as we continue to grow? So we're going to touch on that a little bit today, and then hopefully you guys can take some stuff with you. And if you guys have any questions, we'll answer them at the end. All right, so these statistics I found pretty mind-blowing, so I wanted to share these with you. So something obviously very different about this generation. So I want you to think about, your own patients, if you guys are clinical, or even just in your own friend groups or your own lives. How many chronic conditions have you heard your friends or your homeschool group or your clinicians, like how many chronic conditions are you hearing about now that you didn't hear about 10, 20 years ago? I've been in pediatrics for over 10 years. And at that point, like the conditions that I was seeing then compared to now are vastly different. It's like your normal childhood illness, your strep, your ear infections, fine, that stuff still existed. But now we have so many neuro kids, and we have autism at high rates, and we have chronic ailments, and we have chronic things that are causing so many more problems. So in the end of the day, the times aren't necessarily changing. The environment is what's changing, and we need to be the ones to know how to adapt to that. So these aren't just numbers. 1 in 6 children have a neurodevelopmental disorder. 54% have a chronic condition. 54% of kids. And again, looking back to like your childhood classrooms, you didn't see any of these chronic conditions. Like we didn't have where you had food allergies. Like you didn't have all of these things. So the times are definitely in that direction of like, how do we stop it? How do we prevent these things from continuing to happen? 1 in 11 have asthma. There's 3 times the amount of pediatric autoimmune conditions since 1970. So if that's the case now, what's it going to be in another 50 years? That's what we have to try to prevent. The genetics haven't changed in over 30 years, right? But listen to that, the explanation only fits what the environment has. So whether it be your air you breathe, the water that you're drinking, the medications that we're taking, all of these things have control of how do we help the environment that we're surrounded in. And I always tell our families, control the 4 walls of your home, because that's going to be the best that you can control. And the rest of it, we just have to pray that our bodies are adapted enough to be able to deal with the day-to-day ailments. All right, so pesticides, heavy metals, plastics, molds, mycotoxins, EMFs, indoor air. I know that we're gonna have some mold talks today, so I won't dig too big into that, but I have a really big story with mold. And so, I lived in black mold for about 2.5 years, caused a huge setback in my journey, caused a lot of issues, and it's what sparked the PANS PANDAS symptoms for my son. So there's a time and a place where it's like, how do we assess the environment? And it's not always one thing. So for us, if we're walking through pesticides, glyphosate is in the urine of most American children and the food that they're eating by the time that they wake up. And if you've seen the studies, and I know there's some birthing people, I don't know if they're in here currently, but practitioners, the studies of, the umbilical cord and the studies of pulling the toxins from that in utero are so high. And I don't have those numbers, but they're incredibly high. So it's like, how do we allow ourselves to be set up for success from the beginning, right? Lead, obviously a lot of people know about lead, right? But then people think, okay, well, not in my practice, but in other practices, maybe we're recommending rice cereals, so then high levels of arsenic right from the beginning, right? Mold, like I said, really high levels of mold are happening in these homes, and that's becoming super unfortunate. People will get their homes tested and to find out that their HVAC was full of mold the whole time. It's not gonna always pull up on your home mold test, right? So again, it's knowledge is power, and I'm not here, speaking on myself, I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to plant a seed to know that dig for an answer and always know that there could be another reason. Children are not just little adults, and this is, people always say, children are glorified adults, and you take them and you're kind of looking at a smaller person, but it's like, really think about the size of what that looks like, right? So if you scale down a child and you're scaling down the size of them, what they're going to have issues with at such a small age, adult may not. But then also, there's not an apples to apples comparison when it comes to a child. So you can have one child that has no symptoms living in a mold house. Everybody's just fine. And then the other one, it's just wreaked havoc and it's caused neurological symptoms. That does go back to genetics. That goes back to pathways. It goes back to detoxing, immature detox pathways, and higher absorption rates. Was there more absorption with mom in utero? And now that baby was able to have more. For me, my daughter, blessingly, she doesn't really have many challenges. And, I didn't change anything from one pregnancy to the next, but my exposure had changed. So ended up with some GI stuff, went through dysbiosis, went through candida, and then when I got pregnant with my son, then he kind of had a little bit more of a challenged immune system as time went on. So, I was like, man, for so long, I'm like, I did nothing different, literally. If anything, I was better with him, and he's lived way healthier than I did anything with my daughter. But in the end, it comes down to that entire pathway. So once I did MTHFR testing, I was able to see, well, this makes sense. He has more of a higher variant of problems with detoxification than my daughter does. So then I got my husband tested. I'm like, let's see, is it your fault or is it mine? Right? Like, let's see who the problem is. It was me. And so, in the end, it's just, the children are a byproduct of what you are. And so being here, and I know there's a lot of pregnant mamas here too, for us, it's just build your foundation now and get that working and make sure that our bodies are set up for the best success that we can have. Because if I had to do it all over again, I can tell you it would be completely different than what it was starting out. All right, the bucket theory of toxic burden. So I really enjoy the way that this reads, because every person, right, starts with a bucket. And every toxin adds a little bit of water to that bucket. So I always tell people, just because you're sitting on let's say strep, for example. If someone gets strep, sure, not ideal, right, bacterial infection. But in the ideal world, right, you're treating with herbs, you're treating with antibiotics, the child should be good afterwards, right? Bacteria should go away, everything should manage out to be okay. if your bucket's already filled, if you're walking into that hotel room that has mold and your bucket's already filled, if you're going to stay at grandma's house for 2 weeks and your bucket's already filled, what's gonna happen? It's gonna spill over. So you don't always know how full the bucket is, and that's the biggest thing. But you have control over what's being put into that bucket, at least to some extent. So again, just paying attention to the plastics, the neurological stress, making sure that we're really focusing on the nervous system, whether it be through guided breathing, meditation, your chiropractor. All of those things are so beneficial to make sure that these aren't adding to your bucket, because once you hit overflow, we tend to have more challenges. Does that mean that we can't empty out the bucket again? No, we absolutely can, and that's what we work towards in functional medicine, especially in our pediatric population. But all of these things just add to it. So all of that exposure is just continuous, right? So what maybe starts off as something so simple as some eczema at 4 months old can really escalate into something significant. Now we have speech delay, and we have global developmental delays, and then we start to have more challenges as time arises. So the bucket in that theory is really important. All right, so I wrote this from a clinical standpoint, but I want you to also think of it from a mom standpoint as well. So what it looks like for our patients, for our children, for the kids in your co-op group, for the people that are around you, right? So brain and nervous system, we have all sorts of diagnoses, and I'd say that the biggest things too that we've seen change in the pediatric population is definitely has to be neurological disorders. And from a clinician standpoint, and I'll call you out, Valerie's sitting up front for me here. Valerie's one of our providers at our Oak Brook location. We can say that it's not just one diagnosis, and that's what gets so challenging, is you can see these neuro kids, and we have these parents, sudden onset changes, and we'll maybe find mold, or we'll find strep or mycoplasma on a lab. But then we do more testing, it's like the bucket was like so full to begin with that when they had that mycoplasma or that strep infection, it threw them for a loop, right? So then it's like, well, we're not just digging to find things, but again, just always picture that bucket theory, all the things that built up to that. And the neurological disruption, that gut-brain axis is so disruptive, and we see that so much, and we can see it on our neuro testing, we can see it on our gut testing, our stool testing, that compromise is there. So, the gut is intended to be born sterile, and it's intended to build the immune system and let those maternal antibodies really help develop that process. But when there's toxins exposures from the beginning, or there's high stress in a home, there's high stress for a child, a lack of routine, consistency, illness, siblings, you name it, right? All of that's compromised. So ideally, the leaky gut or that sterile system should start to be developed around 6 months, where then we can start to determine, is the child ready for solids? But in the conventional world, we're starting solids at 4 months, that gut's already compromised, where it's not ability, and then we're given rice cereal, and we're doing oats, and the body can't break any of those grains down, and then what, right? So as we work through the process of that gut-brain barrier, our goal is to make sure that that whole system and that whole highway and that whole pathway is not affected. And we see this, like I said, in the testing that we're doing, we can see that connection to those neurological disorders. Gut and immune, like I said, the amount of constipation, the amount of chronic illness that we're seeing with the gut, that's a big challenge. And when we're doing stool testing, there's not one test that looks the same. Some kids, they take probiotics, which fine, maybe their balance of bacteria is not too bad, but we're still seeing significant heavy overgrowths of bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites. So, is it due to normalcy, or is it mom's flora? Was it something that we were exposed to? Is it lack of diet? Is it all the additives in our foods? But we can see that inflammation. And that chronic nature is what's going to continue to fill that bucket. So in an acute phase, like I said, our body should be able to take care of everything, but as something's kind of chronically exposed, the bucket just becomes too full. Hormones and growth, we're seeing so much early puberty and thyroid dysfunction, especially in children. And again, when I started in pediatrics, I'm not even sure at that point we were running thyroids on kids. And then eventually it was like, we have to run thyroid labs on kids. What are we doing? This is crazy, right? And the amount of dysfunction that we are seeing with just that miscommunication between the brain and the thyroid gland is too high. And it's toxins. It's definitely toxins. I can say that for sure. Puberty, I mean, there's only so much you can control, right? Like we have families that do everything from the beginning. They're doing everything right. They're watching their foods. Everything's organic. They cook everything from scratch. Things can still happen, and then you have to assess, well, what's the environment look like? Are we living in mold? Are we exposed to mold? Do we live within 5 acres of a golf course? Is there glyphosate? Big thing that we see. Within 5 acres, 5 miles of a golf course. 5 miles, that's a long time. That's a long distance, but 5 miles it takes for that air to travel. So what do those numbers look like? We moved a couple years ago, and we moved onto 40 acres, and it was a cornfield for 35 years plus, and I was paranoid that my well was gonna have glyphosate. So I made sure we did heavy testing on that before I even bought that home, and luckily our well's really deep. But the exposure, it's like, what does that look like? How can you avoid it? Well, I did some regenerative soil planting, and we're gonna hope for the best. But again, you can't avoid your environment, but you can control as much as you can. All right, this is my motto. Patients that are in here definitely know this. Steph, I know you can relate to this, but if we're not testing, we're guessing. So in our clinic, we are very big on testing. And not testing to completely waste your time, but testing to figure out our process. If we're not testing and we're going in and we're gonna start treating neurological issues, and we're gonna start killing off mycoplasma and strep and mold and doing all these things, but your gut wasn't a foundation that we looked at first, I can promise you're not gonna have the results you need, and we're gonna have way more side effects than we need to. So for us, we're trying to determine what is first. And these are just some examples of some of the testing that we do to kind of find some of that root cause diagnoses. And so the gut zoomer is a stool test, it's a comprehensive test, and we're able to get 30 pages of your child's microbiome. We're able to see what that dysfunction looks like, where the miscommunication is there maldigestion, are we malabsorbing things, is there issues with nutrients, right? Because we'll draw labs and we'll see, well, I take vitamins every day, but your vitamin levels are in the toilet. Well, why? Because we're not absorbing them, because the gut's not able to handle any of that. So then we need to backtrack, okay, why? Or our iron levels are really low, but we have an overgrowth of bacteria in the gut, and how are they gonna live? Well, they're gonna eat all of our iron to survive, right? So again, looking at these things and being able to track these pathogens and treating them effectively is gonna give us the success in the orders that we need. NeuroZoomer Plus is a big one we use on our neuro kids, and we're able to really see that blood-brain barrier integrity. And I know that was something I was referencing, but when you see that and it's evident, and then we can see infections that cross that blood-brain barrier. We can see the infections that are happening in that level. Did EBV cross into that brain? Did strep cross into that brain? Did CMV cross into that brain? Is that where some of our neuro issues are coming from, right? So then we rebuild. What does it go back to? Still the gut, right? That's still our foundation. So we go back, we fix on that, and then we work through the rest of the processes. Total toxic burden is probably one of our favorite tests. This is a urine test, and it's the easiest thing to do. Little potty trained or not, we got ways. But when it comes down to looking at this, we're looking at heavy metals, mycotoxins, pesticides, plastics, environmental exposures. So pages and pages of all of these things. And again, it's not to fear you, but it's to empower you and say, what could I do better? I have people that don't do any sort of plastic in their home, and their BPAs are through the roof. So then we assess, right? What's your toothpaste like? What's the container of that? What water bottles are they drinking out of? What are they doing at school? Right? So again, it's not like, oh, I have to live in a bubble. I mean, I kind of wish I did sometimes. But then I kind of also wished I lived in oblivion and knew none of this. I could just live free. But what it comes down to is like, how do we protect it to the extent of what we can, right? And especially for me, having a daughter, like I want to ensure that we are at a place where when she decides to have a family, that I have her as healthy as she can be, so that she doesn't have to go through the heartbreak and the challenges that I did. But I'm also reassured that I'll get her through it if we need to. These are just some common patterns that we see with these toxic kiddos, and I kind of went through some of them. But again, dysbiotic gut, mycotoxins, heavy metals, neurologicals, glyphosate exposures, plasticizers load. All of these things are linked to something else, right? And again, this is what I was saying. It's not going to be one thing. The amount of times I could tell you where I came in and I thought, this is what's going on. I get test results back and I was like, and there's plus 10. 10 more things, right? So we have to work through the process though, and this is where root cause medicine is not going to be one answer. And it's not going to be a sprint, it's going to be a marathon. It is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time because there are steps and there's pathways and there's a journey that has to be taken. All right, I'm gonna tell you a little story. So this was actually my son. So we were about 6 months living in our home with not knowing that we had mold. The previous owners had painted the walls. And we had put furniture in front of the walls. So not knowing there was black mold. And we ended up with strep, which we've never had. I have, in the 30, I think I just turned 38 years, never had strep in my life. So I had strep, figured I got it from someone giving me a love cough in the office, and my daughter got it. My son started having sudden onset of tics, eye twitching, and he was negative for strep. Culture was negative for strep. But at that point, I'm like, something's got to give, right? So I treated him because I was treating his symptoms. At this point, to me, I was like, okay, it's just the strep. And me knowing too much, I'm like, oh my gosh, we've got PANDA symptoms, like we are on a journey, this is gonna be intense. We started with functional chiropractic, we started doing all the things. At that point, he got better doing those things, but then it came right back, probably within about 12 weeks. So I'm like, I know what I need to do. And my husband told me, I'll never forget this, he said, you got this. Stop being mom, go to the provider, like you got this, you know what you need to do. I did a gut zoomer, we did mold testing, found the mold in the house, did the remediation. His gut zoomer was like nothing I've ever seen on any patient that I had had. So then that felt defeated. I'm like, great, thanks God, what else do you want to give me? This is my kid and this is, okay, I got this. His calprotectin, which is an inflammatory marker, was over 700. In any conventional world, it would have been instant GI referral. But I knew if I did a GI referral, even on this, I knew it was gonna happen. It was gonna be steroids, it was gonna be scoping him, and it was gonna be giving me no answers. Heck if I was doing that. Wasn't gonna happen. I got him the test, figured out the problems. He was severely dysbiotic, lots of inflammation, dysbiosis meaning just an imbalance of bacteria. At that point, wasn't absorbing anything. So I known that mold, again, was probably just working on it, and what happened? The strep filled over his bucket, right? So at that point, I went through significant treatment with him. He learned to swallow pills very quickly because opening them was awful. And within time, 6 weeks, we were down to 200. And I was like, all right, don't be an overachiever. It wasn't where I wanted it to be. But I knew that we had some time. And by the time we had worked on it, 12 weeks, we were at 70. And by 4 months in, we were normal. And at that point, I had said, if I would have sent him anywhere, the body plays dominoes. So GI would have done steroids, worked through that process, not given him an answer, not fixed him, not even probably told me to do a probiotic, probably told me not even to change his diet. And at that point, then I know the body would have turned into something else, and it would have dominoed into another diagnosis and another diagnosis and another diagnosis. And then I would have just had a big mess on my hands. It wasn't even a thought in my mind, but for a split second, my prior education got me, and I was like, do I need to go to GI? And luckily I have these amazing women in my practice where they were like, are you crazy? I'm like, I think so. I think I am. Like, get me out of this mom mode and get me back to provider mode. At the end of the day, the body knows how to heal when you remove what's in the way, but it does take testing to get there. Here's a basic framework that I feel like any of you could benefit from, which is why I put it on here, of just removing these toxins, right? So in the process of restoration, and this is where I say it's a marathon and not a sprint, we have to remove, we have to repair, we have to replenish, we have to mobilize, and we have to restore. And even when we put you on protocols in the office, those that have been through the practice know we're not just giving you this entire, here you go, here's your 6-month plan, we'll see you back in 6 months, good luck. It takes a step. So month 1, we're gonna maybe do this, and then month 2, we're gonna do this, and then we have to build into this, and then we may have to change this because this came up, right? So the process is super important, but if you go in and try to restore all these nutrients and give all of these things at once, but those pathogens are still in the way, nothing's helping. You really just have expensive urine, is what I say. It's just coming right out. Nothing's being absorbed. So we have to work through the process of where's those exposures at? Now, mind you, when I moved into this home, I did $20,000 in mold testing. And I hired a dog. And the dog found more mold after I spent the $20,000 in testing. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm like, all right, have I lost my mind, or does this dog really know what it's doing? Sure as heck, the dog knew. And the dog stopped at all of my HVAC systems. They treated my HVAC system. So we're still fighting that. And they found 250,000 spores of Stachybotrys in my HVAC system. So it's never done until it's done. But again, trusting the process of, okay, I can remove this, and then we can continue to replenish and restore. Here's another kiddo that we had. I wanted to give an eczema story. I feel like this is pretty impactful for a lot of people, a lot of eczema in this world. So she basically, mom had said she'd been itching forever, for as long as she knew she was itching. So she had full body eczema, went to multiple dermatologists, and the number one thing is a steroid cream, right? Sometimes we're blessed enough to get the kids that did bleach baths. Those are fun. Wet wraps, elimination diets, but just constant, didn't know. And we always say, you know, eczema is not a lotion deficiency. It's not a steroid deficiency. A steroid's not gonna fix it. It's actually gonna cause long-term atrophy, long-term thinning of the skin. You're not gonna get that back, but it's not getting to the root. So explaining this to mom, she was all in, and we did testing. She had severe dysbiosis and imbalance of bacteria. There was so much going on. She wasn't absorbing any of her nutrients, and those are all very vital for skin integrity, right? All of this was a problem. So we addressed the entire process here. So we did some gut repair, we did some microbiome rebuilding, we replenished her nutrients, we did some food elimination, and we did some skin support. Now, talking about food elimination, is the answer always to remove food forever? No. Is there times where the body is just hovering that bucket still because there's maybe other factors we don't know about and the food can be a trigger? Yeah. So I've been gluten-free for over 10 years, and I won't even attempt. To me, it's just not worth it. But I've started to play with it with my son now that we're kind of out of this neuro phase. And I'll give him a little bit here and there, and he thinks it's like the best thing in the world. And I'm like, I don't get it. But at a certain point, right, he's 10 and he just wants to fit in with the baseball kids or the people that he's around, right? His sister that makes not good decisions sometimes and wants to have some of her stuff. But the point is to make sure the body isn't in a reactive state, though. So if the body's still trying to fight something and we're not fully healed, then you're going to give something that could be inflammatory, which we do see glide and antibodies through your neuro testing and through your gut testing. So we're able to know, okay, is the body healing, or are we still in a state of inflammation, or are you kind of a borderline celiac where these antibodies are present and we should really be careful? So again, testing, not guessing. These are some things that you guys can start with now. I kind of went through a list, and I think some of it will be relatable to some of you. This is a lot of what we do, and so I wanted to share some of that for you. In the kitchen, we have an RO system. I don't have a whole house RO system because we have a lot of house, but we pay attention to it. We have a water filter system and then an RO for drinking water. And just small things, like this year, we're a travel ball family. So I got kids in Wakanda today and kids in Kenosha today, and we're everywhere. And so when our stainless steel water bottles are out, the kids tend to go to plastic. And that was one thing that we stopped this year, was I bought huge canteens of stainless steel water bottles to fill, because I'm we're gonna try one more thing this year. And I'm still on the same journey as you guys, right? But we can all do better. Making sure that you're choosing organic for as much as you can. I know that food prices are absolutely insane, but go local, go to your farms. They may not be certified organic because it costs them a ton of money to do so, but they may not spray their products and their produce, right? Removing plastic storage, glass and stainless steel. They even have, if you absolutely need, Ziploc bags type things, they have the compostable ones that aren't going to be fully plastic. Cast iron, this is the only thing we use, cast iron and stainless steel. When I started using these things, I'm like, how do people use these? Everything's stuck. I'm like, this is a nightmare. And then I learned the tricks. You got to get it really hot, and it's got to sit there for like 5 minutes before you put anything in it, and then nothing sticks, and it's amazing. So it's all a learning process. In the home, we have air doctors in every room. It's non-negotiable in our house. We live on 40 acres. We are surrounded by farm fields. We know that they're spraying. Crop dusters go over us. It's just a non-negotiable in our house. Inspecting for mold. If you have water damage or if you have a suspect, if something's soft, if you see stains underneath your sinks and your bathrooms, there's mold underneath that. I'll guarantee you. I'm not telling you to go home and your husband comes home and you literally have nothing left in your house. We've all done that a little bit, but I'm like, I don't know what happened. It just came off the wall. I think we need to replace that, right? Fragrances. This is a big one. I saw something recently. My husband sent me this bar of soap, and he's like, is this a good one? And it was organic and all the different things, and like the third ingredient was fragrance. I'm like, no, it's not. So they'll try. They'll say they're organic. They'll say they're pure. They'll say it's good for you, but unfortunately, it's still not. Opening up your windows, especially if there's not an allergen. If there is an allergen, I avoid keeping them closed, but just making sure, even in the winter, that we're clearing out the space as much as we can. And then on the body, so EWG goes back and forth. We also use like the Yucca app. That's a good one. I put it on my teen's phone. So she scans everything. She's that kid that goes into Sephora with her friends, and I'm like, good luck. Good luck. And so she's like, yeah, I can't have that. I'm like, you're right, you can't. So again, scanning these products, it's all donation based on their app. So you can donate $1, $10, and you can get the whole app to be able to scan any product with the barcode. So pretty nice. It doesn't do protein powders or like formulas or laundry detergents, but you can at least get an idea. Avoiding antibacterial soaps, the amount of triclosan that we're seeing in kids' urine on the TTB, way too high. During COVID, that's all we saw, super high triclosan levels. And that was because all the kids in the schools was antibacterial soap. They were chasing them with hand sanitizer, right? And it was all being absorbed into their bodies. Mineral sunscreen over chemical, and then trying to do natural fiber clothing as much as possible. Alrighty, so very, very big synopsis here. The child nobody could figure out, right? The 8-year-old with an ADHD diagnosis or stimulants, high levels of mold. The chronic constipation and the bloating since infancy, elevated glyphosate. Eczema flares every few months, neural antibodies. There was the blood-brain barrier was compromised. Rage episodes, explosive behavior, or your rage kid that you're hearing about. Leaky gut, food sensitivity-induced behavior. Multiple specialists, no root cause found, lead. This is just how he is. It's not true. There's a roadmap that needs to be found. Here's some questions clinicians and or parents or people that you're around. These are questions that'll open any door, right? Do you have mold? What does your child eat? Are you buying organic? Are you filtering your water? What products are you using? Number 4 is a big one, especially right now. Have your pets been treated with flea or tick prevention? You put it underneath the skin on their neck and you think your kids aren't gonna touch them, right? How old's your home? Like I said, farms, golf courses, industrial areas. What are the chemical exposures that you're being surrounded with? Has your child ever been tested for heavy metals or environmental toxins? Again, super easy, urine test. In the end of the day, I want you to embed this into your mind. The children coming into the practice or into your life are your own children, right? They're not broken. They're truly burdened. And again, that's something that we are just continuously seeing, and I don't feel it's going to let up. So for us, we are working really hard into just molding this environment for your children and making sure that we are testing what's going on in their bodies. We're asking the real questions. We're treating the entire child because that is what we do, and that is root cause medicine. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Hello. Thank you so much. That was amazing and so informative and so detailed. I really appreciate it. We have a few minutes and would love to take questions from the audience for Jessica to answer. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll walk over with the microphone. Oh, got one in the back.
Thank you so much for speaking today. I just had a question. As a practitioner, I hear a lot, well, now we're getting better at diagnosing neurological conditions or autism, and that's why there's an increase. How would you respond to that? I just want to get your input.
Absolutely we are, and that's a blessing. Yeah, I mean, we are, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we are getting better. Is it more of a cop-out? No. Again, the burden is just too high. So I love when I have these conversations with, different practitioners or people that aren't fully in. But in the end, I would say absolutely we're blessed to have the tools that we have to be able to help these kids and get them to a place of healing.
Yeah, I have a question. As your kiddos are transitioning into solids, if not the rice cereals or the oats, what do you suggest instead?
Sure. So we follow more of a baby-led weaning approach in our practice. So we're not recommending solids till at least 6 months or until your child is showing signs of readiness. So making sure they have a strong core, they're wanting to sit up on their own, they're kind of showing that they're interested. We don't believe in force feeding. And then through that approach, we're starting with good fats, right? So we're good intake, so avocados or steamed veggies. And everybody can kind of do it a little bit different. But if you're going to be here all day, I can kind of walk you through our conversation at our booth too, because I feel like I have a whole talk, and I know I don't have a lot of time for that. But starting with whole foods and just making sure that is truly it, because the digestive enzymes in the body aren't fully developed till their 1-year molars come in, and they're really not starting until about 6 months. So hence the inability to break down those grains, causing more inflammation from an early onset.
Hello, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing about your own child, because there's so much pressure on moms to do everything perfect, and you have so much knowledge, and if your child, that can happen, and you know everything,
Yes.
It makes me think oh, I'm not doing so bad. And then
My pleasure.
thank you. And then secondly, the biggest plights in my life are finding a good deodorant and toothpaste. Do you have any
gosh.
recommendations for those?
This is a tough one. Deodorant drives me probably the most crazy. The most crazy. And then you think you found a good one, and then you have a rash for 6 weeks. And I'm like, I quit. So I'm wearing nothing. No. It's tough, and I would say it goes back and forth, and it's playing with all the natural ones, whether you're playing with loom, whether you're playing with a local organic one, where you're playing with essential oils. Some people just do baking soda. Some people break out from baking soda. You're literally trial and error until you find one that your body can like. But in the end of the day, we know that we really shouldn't have body odor as much as we probably do. And so toxins and working through armpit detoxing and lymphatic drainage and sauna and all that stuff too. And then toothpaste, that's also a big thing. And I know we have a dentist in the room that can probably help with some of this. But as we work through, obviously no fluoride's 100% exactly something that we would approach. So we don't recommend any fluoride. Hydroxyapatite's kind of gone a couple different ways over the last couple years. Do it, don't it, do it, that. I use the holistic dentist that we go to still swears by, looking to something like Dr. Jen's or something that has a 10% hydroxy just to kind of help that particle break. But in the end, it's again, there's always something new out there. Always try something different. Risewell's another one. But next week you'll read about them in the paper, and then you'll be like, great, now what do I use, right? So it's ever defeating. That was a good one. Those are the two very defeating products that I feel like we struggle with the most. Yeah.
Well, thank you. We actually are out of time for questions, but Jessica's actually going to be speaking again today, and like she said, she has a booth, so I'm sure she'd be happy to answer questions in the expo hall. And so I just wanted to ask everyone to give her an amazing round of applause. She did such a great job.